Confirmation hearings for Donald Trump's cabinet nominees begin this week, starting tomorrow with Pete Hegseth, the former Fox Weekend host, tapped to head the Department of Defense. The Army National Guard veteran with no experience managing a complex organization like the Pentagon will face members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He'll certainly face questions from the Democrats on the committee over his past, including allegations of personal misconduct and excessive drinking while he was a host at Fox, financial mismanagement at two veterans nonprofits he ran, all of which Hegseth denies, and an allegation of sexual assault in 2017. No charges were filed, and Hegseth claims the incident was consensual, but he paid his accuser an undisclosed amount in 2023. He also faces questions about how his current views impact his fitness to run the Pentagon, since Hegseth has said he believes that women should not serve in combat. But his views on women's rights have been retrograde since his college days, apparently. Reuters reports that a classmate recalled putting up posters by Princeton's Organization of Women Leaders, a feminist group known better by its acronym, OWL. Meanwhile, Hegseth and his friends from the campus's conservative paper, the Princeton Tory, were tearing her posters down and putting up their own, leading to a verbal altercation. Adding that as publisher of the Tory, Hegseth ran articles that called homosexuality abnormal and immoral, and argued that sexual intercourse with an unconscious woman should not be a clear case of rape because there would be no duress. He wrote a piece that attacked what he saw as Princeton's gratuitous glorification of diversity. I'm joined now by a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator and combat veteran Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Senator, as a combat veteran, and thank you again, as always, for your service, what concerns you the most about Pete Hegseth? Is it his seemingly retrograde views of women, or his alleged mismanagement of funds, or his alleged drinking, or all of the above?
I mean, hi, Joy. It's all of the above. Frankly, this man is not qualified to lead the greatest military on the face of the earth. I don't know that he could plan and supervise a combat mission. Remember that the largest organization he ran was a platoon. So that's maybe 40 guys. And the DOD is 3 million personnel, civilian and uniform. He's in over his head. There's no way that he's qualified to run the Department of Defense.
Just some little additional reporting. This is from the Princeton reporting. Under Hegseth's watch, the Tory, his publisher, published a cover story in 2002 that put a cartoon owl in a gun sight. And then on page 3 appeared to show the same owl with 3 bullet holes in its head, drops of blood spilling to the ground, which the Tory headline was, "Killing Feminism, Owl Sabotages the Women's Movement," and that's Organization of Women Leaders. We've also had Gretchen Carlson, who more in an up-to-date world worked with Pete Hegseth. She's urged the Armed Services Committee to let Hegseth's alleged victim provide testimony anonymously. Here's the quote. While Mr. Hegseth has allegedly released the survivor from her non-disclosure agreement, his attorney has threatened to sue her for defamation if she were to come forward to discuss what happened to her and if her testimony were to prevent Mr. Hegseth's confirmation. Mr. Hegseth's threats cast a chilling pall on women who simply want to speak out about sexual misconduct and should be, and in and of themselves disqualifying. What do you make of that? We've had something like we've had 28,000 service members have experienced unwanted sexual contact in 2023. 82% of them were women. 18% of them were men. 8,515 reports of sexual assault involving service members are still active. Should this man, should the woman who was allegedly assaulted by him be allowed to testify, in your view, or should she be protected somehow and allowed to testify?
So, Joy, that's the problem. My understanding, so there's an FBI report that was given to the top Democrat and the top Republican on the committee to read, but the rest of us were not allowed access to it. And remember that the FBI report is requested by the transition team. So it's requested by the Trump transition team. And they have not interviewed any of the women with significant allegations against him. Well, quite a few of the women with significant allegations against him have not been interviewed by the FBI investigators. These women don't want to come forward because they are afraid. Some of them have young children, and it's multiple women and they are afraid because of the really attacks and threats to their personal safety and the safety of their children, which is why they have not been able to come forward or wanted to come forward and testify before Congress. That said, my understanding is some of them would like to be contacted by the FBI investigative team with the vetters, and they have not been talked to. And so now we are faced with this incomplete report, and even as incomplete as it is, I'm not even allowed to see it. So I don't know what is in this man's background. And this is a guy that's going to lead, this military. 20% of the force is women and female warriors who meet the same standards and achieve their positions in the military and go to combat and fight alongside their buddies. And this man is going to lead them, and they don't know if he's going to have their backs.
To say nothing of it, I didn't even mention his seeming sort of non-negative views toward people who are alleged to have committed war crimes. What do you think it would do to the military to have someone like this man who, the right loves to talk about DEI and claim that anyone who is a person of color or a woman is inherently unqualified for whatever job they have? He has no qualifications for this job. There's nothing about him that makes him qualified other than Trump likes him on Fox and his demographics, which the future president seems to like. What do you think it would do to our military to have someone like this come in with no apparent real FBI thorough background check and then be in charge of our nuclear capabilities?
Yeah, well, I think it would be bad for morale, obviously, but I think it would sow confusion because our leaders in the military wouldn't know what they could talk to the Secretary of Defense about. And by the way, for our allies, I would be reluctant to share information with the United States military, with our leadership, information that would keep us safe and keep our troops safe, because they didn't know if this man is compromised. Remember that the point of the background check is to make sure that the person you put forward can't be compromised, can't be blackmailed, can't be bribed. These are all the types of things that background check is supposed to be providing information to me, the senator, who is going to be part of the advise and consent. So I can't even make up my mind whether or not this man personally is vulnerable to being blackmailed. What if the next woman comes forward while he's Secretary of Defense and say, I'm going to come forward and I have the receipts on you and that sexual assault and I have tape and video, whatever that is. What if Russia comes forward and says that? Now do we have a Secretary of Defense who can be bribed or who can be blackmailed by a foreign power? Because if I was a foreign power, that's what I would be trying to dig up that information on. All of that aside from the fact that he's not qualified to run the organization. He's never run anything bigger than a 40-man platoon. The last two organizations that he was responsible for their financial well-being, they had to bring in a forensic accountant because he mismanaged it so badly. This man is not qualified to run an Applebee's, let alone the Department of Defense. I mean, your local Applebee's manager has managed more people and a bigger budget than he has.